everyone, I am Sneha, co-founder and CEO DevCompass, and as always, you know what I'm going to say. I am super thrilled to have you guys here. Thank you so much for bearing with me throughout. We've covered a lot of topics in so many videos. I know all of you guys are going through those walkthroughs, submitting assignments, connecting with people who are learning alongside you, and I really hope that you are having a fun journey participating in the cohort. For everyone else who does not have a context about what I am talking, please head over to devcompass.ai and you will get all the information about our Claude certificate preparation course. We've covered a bunch of things already, and specifically stage 4 is a lot about Claude Code, what is a markdown file, and in the previous videos we have been mentioning these built-in tools again and again. Access tools, read and write, Glob. Oh my god, weird name, but in this video we're actually going to talk about that. What are those built-in tools? How do we decide when to use which one? So let's get started. Claude Code has 6 built-in tools. Every task you give it gets broken down into calls to some combination of these 6 tools. Okay, so understanding which tool Claude reaches for and why makes you a better Claude Code user, and I think that's what all of us want. So a better debugger when things go wrong. I absolutely suck at debugging. And better at writing skills with allowed tools, which we have already seen in the previous video, that can actually constrain the right things. So let's get through all 6. You can already see it on screen. Read, write, edit, bash, grep, glob. 6? Yes, 6. Okay, so let me walk you through all these 6 tools. Wow, love the slide. Okay, first card, read. So it reads the full content of a file. So you have to use it when Claude needs to understand existing code. When Claude needs to understand existing code before making changes. Read is expensive for larger files. It brings the whole file into context. If the file is 2000 lines and you need 3 of them, that's a costly context spend. So in that case, use grep first to narrow down, then read if you need the full picture. The second one is write. It creates a new file or completely replaces an existing one. So you have to use it for new files, new test files, new modules, new scripts. What is it to watch out? Write overwrites everything. So if the file has 500 lines and you need to maybe change 10 of them, using write replaces all 500. That is risky and wasteful. So you should instead use edit for targeted changes to existing files. The third tool is edit. It makes a very targeted replacement within an existing file. It finds a specific block and replaces it. So you have to use it when modifying existing code. Surgical, precise, preserves the rest of the file. What you need to watch out is edit requires the match string to be exact. If there is a white space difference, slightly different line, the edit would fail. So the fallback is read the file first to get the exact content and then edit with the correct match string. Our fourth tool is bash. It runs a shell command, so you can use it for running tests, starting services, installing packages, running the linter, anything that requires execution. What you need to watch out is bash is the most powerful tool in this list. It can do anything a shell command can do. That's why your claude.md constraints and your skill allowed tools matter most for bash. If a skill doesn't need to run commands, please don't include it in allowed tools. Like, please don't include bash in the allowed tools. Fifth card is grep. So it searches for a pattern across files. Use it when you need to find where something is used. All callers of a function, all files that import a module, all uses of a specific constant. Much more efficient than reading every file. It returns file names and line numbers. So you can use grep to narrow before you read, like we already discussed. And the sixth and final tool card is Glob. So it lists file matching a path pattern. So use it when you need to find files by name or extension, all test files or TypeScript files in a directory, or maybe all config files at the root. What you need to watch out on this card is the most important for the exam point of view, that Glob finds files by path pattern. Grep finds files by content. These are two different jobs. So Glob first when you're looking for what files to work with, then grep or read to work with their contents. Please memorize all these 6 cards and understand what it does, so that in case if there's a context based scenario as well, on which for example there are 5 scenarios and you're like, oh and if it is asked like, oh, should you use a read or a write or a glob or a grep, then you know what it is about. Okay, now let's see. Now the decision flow chart, which is super important, because the real question isn't what does grep do. That is super simple. Why would Anthropic ask us that? But which tool do I reach for right now, like I was mentioning? So let's look at the flow chart. What are you trying to do? So let's say find files by name or extension. Glob, you need a list of files matching a pattern. Test files, TypeScript file, configuration files. Glob gives you the list. Find something inside files, a function name, an import, a constant. Obviously, grep searches content, returns file paths and line numbers. If you want to understand existing code, read. But grep first if the file is super large, because you literally don't want to fill your context window. So narrow down before you expand on the context. If you want to make a targeted change to existing code, edit, not write, because edit is surgical. Write will replace everything. If you want to create a new file, definitely write. If you want to run a command, bash. So grep, remember, grep equals find in content, glob equals find by path. This can be confusing. Edit does not equal write. These 3 statements are super important. Rest everything is simple to remember. Okay. Now, before we kind of summarize the whole thing, the 3 anti-patterns that the walkthroughs ahead is going to ask you to diagnose, and these are the mistakes that don't produce an error message. They just produce worse results silently. So the first one, using write on an existing file. The task, add input validation to the process refund function in, let's say, refund handler.js file. Write would be a wrong approach, because it will read the whole file into memory, regenerate all 340 lines, write everything back. What is the risk? Anything that Claude doesn't perfectly reproduce from the original is overwritten. So the right tool would be edit. Target the specific function, replace only those lines, rest of the file remains untouched. The anti-pattern 2 would be finding all callers of process refund across the code base. So using read on a large file when grep would suffice is a mistake. So if you're finding all places that call process refund across the code base, the wrong approach would be to read every file one by one looking for the call. Okay, the right tool is use grep with the pattern process underscore refund, so that it returns file names and line numbers in one pass, so no large files, so no bloating context. The third one is find all files that import validate customer using glob when grep is the right tool. These are confusing, right? So you have to remember that if you make these mistakes, they won't produce error message, they would just lead to silent failures. So if the task is to find all files that import valid customer function, using glob for asterisk.js is the wrong approach, because it will give you every JS file, then you read each one. The right tool would be grep for validate customer, so that it finds only the files that actually contain the import. Glob finds by path pattern, not content. Remember, it finds by path pattern, not content. So if you have, and the walkthrough will have 5 scenarios just like these 3, so you can run through the flow chart before you answer or attempt any of those. That was it for this video. We discussed 6 tools: read, write, edit, bash, grep, glob. Each has a specific job. You know when to choose one, which. Use grep before read. Remember, use edit, not write for existing code. Bash is the most powerful one, so you have to explicitly constrain it in skills with allowed tools. Now because you know what each tool does and which one to reach for, the next video is going to be about how Claude Code approaches tasks at a higher level, specifically when to plan before executing versus when to execute directly, and we will discuss 3 refinement techniques that apply in between, which will map directly to how you, me, or anyone should handle complex code-based tasks without wasting effort or producing unreliable results. So I will see you in the next one. Now go attempt the walkthroughs, and in case you get confused for any concept, come back for more. If you are still stuck, please reach out to us in the community chat, write an email. Yeah, we are always active. Okay.